Governments hide the truth. The aliens exist. It all began on the night of February 24, 1942, when many eyewitnesses said they saw several unidentified flying objects in the sky of Los Angeles. UFOs on which U.S. anti-aircraft artillery would open fire. As in the case of Kennedy's murder, U.S. officials did not give a satisfactory explanation to public opinion. It should be noted that the number of Californians claiming to have seen UFOs amounts to a few thousand, but also the fact that it was 3 months since America had entered the Second World War after the Pearl Harbor attack, and the Americans entered the psychological fibrillation of the war. 5 years later, on July 7, 1947, the famous Roswell incident occurred. Then the U.S. Army would have recovered the wreck of a UFO that would have collapsed near Roswell in New Mexico. And in this case, an impressive number of people, over 100, said they would have seen either the UFO or its wreck. Moreover, conspiracies speculate that Americans would have recovered the corpse of an alien, or even an alien alive. The official explanation, as if a meteorological balloon had collapsed, no one again thanked. Since then, the number of those who say they have seen UFOs exploded, the folly of revelations, controversies and scientific and pseudo-scientific research becoming a mass phenomenon at the planetary scale. Psychologists even say that in ufology we are dealing with the first and real modern mythology, invented in the 20th century. Who killed Kennedy? It can be considered the classic example of conspiracy theory. Indeed, many sociologists say that this is the turning point in the historical conspiracy, when the theoretical conspiracy has turned from intellectual play into a circle. It restricts a group of enthusiasts into a real and explosive mass phenomenon. The phrase is very simple, showing psychologists. Former U.S. President John F. Kennedy, May 29, 1917 – November 22, 1963, enjoyed tremendous sympathy among Americans, and his assassination was perceived as a trauma to the shock that we feel in the moment in which a friend or dear relative dies. All of these emotional and psychological reasons, combined with the many omissions, controversies, and balbings in the Warren Commission report, which have been singled out as Lee Harvey Oswald, have given rise to a monumental public rejection of an official version, an unprecedented reverie in history. So, who killed Kennedy? Probably, we will never find out, because no matter what formal answer they would give now, many years after the controversial crime, various American officials, conspiracy theories, were so tight that there would probably be many doubts forever in accepting a final answer. Kennedy's best real targeted killers are U.S. Federal Reserve, CIA, KGB, FBI, Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson, Fidel Castro, or Mafia. AIDS, Ebola and SARS were invented in the laboratory. Over the last 20 years, one of the most prominent themes of novels and horror films is virus out of control. Bacterial and virological experiments that penetrate security measures would spread instantly around the world and provoke apocalypse. Few know that such fictional topics have arisen precisely from the hypothesis of pseudo-scientists who are convinced of their veracity. by publishing a large number of more or less documented works, in the late 1980s, in which they argued that HIV, Ebola and SARS viruses are actually superbacteriological arms that were secretly created by the US government. Moreover, the spread of AIDS in Africa, among homosexuals and prostitutes would only be the stages of a mass genocide monstrosity, by puritanic and xenophobic elements in the US administration. And the avian flu 2 years ago, a mondial-scale test and a warning to China. The conspiracy theorists also claim that from the very beginning, there is an antivirus for all three bacteriological calamities, but this is kept secret, while the various independent researchers that seek to rediscover remedies are defeated, impeded, or finally, eradicated by those who launched viruses in the world. There is no global warming. Everything is a world business. Conspiracists say the so-called climate change is a perpetuated fraud for financial and ideological purposes. The whole mass hysteria caused by the imminent global warming would be a fake, invented by the obscure interest group Bilderberg. 130 financial and wealthy people, from bankers to politicians, who uses global warming to impose, in secretly, world governance. One of the most profound supporters of this theory is even a climatologist, William M. Gray. He says that, beside global terrorism, global warming is the #1 public enemy that the international power system needed, after the end of the Cold War, to make it easier for big leaders to impose a political cause, with great success on the public, to take abusive measures, in political, economic and social issues, that would be absolutely necessary, to prevent climate change, that is to say, for players from shadow, to realize their interests. In the wake of the mondial obsession with global warming, politicians, scientists, business people, various UN structures, ecological movements, plus numerous secret organizations such as the Bilderberg Group and Club from Rome, will win. Major oil companies have been hampering the development of the electric car for more than 100 years. The most concise. This theory of conspiracy is exposed in the excellent documentary film, Who Killed the Electric Car, from 2006, which suggests that the various technologies that would have enabled the cheap, fast and efficient development of electric cars have been suppressed, and thrown into the air by themselves, by an obscure consortium of large oil companies along with various individuals, being in key positions in even the automotive industry. The first knockout date of the electric car would have happened in 1899, when a highly competitive prototype hit the world speed record at the time, 110 km per hour, a stunning performance for the late 19th century. Despite this, no one heard of the prototype, and the production cars produced in the first years of the 20th century hardly reached 30 to 40 km per hour. The second big blow would have taken place between 1913 and 1914, when the joint efforts of the most prominent inventors of those years, Henry Ford and Thomas Edison, to produce an inexpensive, efficient electric vehicle, were fired with all sorts of fervor by individuals with great financial power and influence. Finally, the last big battle would have happened recently, when General Motors voluntarily buried EV1, the first electric car prototype of a big player in the automotive industry, who entered for a short time, 1996 to 1999, in serial production.
The tsunami from 2004 was caused by a bomb. with the 229,866 deaths it has caused. The tsunami that hit the Indian Ocean on December 26, 2004, in terms of the huge number of casualties it produced, ranks 7th among the top natural disasters of all times and 2nd in the top of the bloody earthquakes. But if it is not a natural disaster, but a genocide that was deliberately initiated, with the help of a so-called tsunami bomb, a nuclear weapon that was detonated in a strategic position in the deep of the ocean. Supporters of conspiracy theories say the technology capable of provoking a tragedy of such proportions is at least feasible, since researches in this area have been conducted since World War II. Experiments with tsunamis bombs occurring in 1944 and 1945 in New Zealand. Also, since 1997, 7 years before the devastating tsunami, U.S. Secretary of Defense William S. Cohen said, "There are groups that have the capacity to engage in eco-terrorism through capable military technology to change the climate, to cause earthquakes or volcanic eruptions." However, apart from the hypothesis that everything was a large-scale bloody test, it is hard to decipher the motives of those who would have hit so severely Southeast Asia through the tsunami in the Indian Ocean.
World Trade Center terrorist attacks. It is perhaps the hottest topic that has fallen prey to conspiracy theories in contemporary history. On the one hand, conspiracy theorists claim that individuals from the United States government and the secret services of the United States have had clear evidence of the imminent attack, but they hid this precious information. As it happened on December 7, 1941, in the case of the aviation attack, Japanese from Pearl Harbor, during the Second World War, refusing to take any small action that would have prevented the attacks. On the other hand, it is speculated that the explosion of the two planes that hit the Twin Towers in New York would not have been strong enough to lead to the collapse of the World Trade Center, which was caused in fact by controlled explosions. There are witnesses who claim to have heard these explosions, and the Pentagon was not actually hit by any plane. What was the purpose of U.S. officials who orchestrated or allowed bloody attacks? Very simple: the launch of the war on terror, the justified rise in military spending, and the legal encroachment of civil liberties and rights.